tell us a little bit about, let's do story time. Tell me how you got into this space and how kind of you ended up coming to this kind of idea of forgiveness as being a powerful thing.
Sure. So, what's interesting, if you had asked me 2 years ago, if I was going to write a book on forgiveness, or if you told me 2 years ago I was going to write a book on forgiveness, I actually would have laughed at you, because that wasn't something. That actually wasn't something that was kind of on the surface for me. But I guess in terms of, to kind of put a little context to it, I actually realized maybe 2-3 years ago before that I had been using forgiveness as a skill set. And it just really was just me being a woman of color in a male-dominated field. So I've spent, my entire career as a management consultant, and just kind of my mere existence, especially earlier in my career. I actually went through kind of a lot of different uphill battles, because I was usually the only, right? I was the only woman and person of color in the spaces and the environments that I worked in. And so I dealt with a lot of kind of subtle and sometimes not so subtle, kind of everything you can think of. I've dealt with it, whether we're talking about sexism, we're talking about racism, we're talking about microaggressions, a lot of unconscious bias. I kind of dealt with that. And forgiveness actually just became part of a muscle that I built, to be able to focus on my work, to really, focus on becoming a great consultant. And I didn't realize how much I had been using it, because I got to a point that I was so good at it, right? When you find out, if you're in the middle of a meeting, and then you may find out that like maybe a couple minutes before the meeting, that one of your colleagues you've been working with has maybe less work experience than you, but is making 45% more money than you. How would you feel? If that was what you were kind of working, and then you gotta kind of take something like that out of your head and push forward and meet with a CEO, or sitting in meetings. Sometimes I sit in meetings, I'm the only woman in the room, and my ideas aren't really acknowledged until they're repeated by one of my male colleagues in a different way. And then it's like, oh, that's a great idea. So that was my experience, day in and day out. And I had to lean on forgiveness as a survival technique. So when it came to the surface a couple years ago, I was at a point where I was really I was really kind of on a roll. After you spent 15 plus years as a consultant, you kind of know what you're doing, right? So I felt pretty confident. I felt like, all kind of some of the earlier challenges in my career were over. I knew I kind of created a formula of success. So for me, it was, if I was the most knowledgeable person in the room, I was the most prepared, I was the hardest person working in the room, then I was always win. That was the belief I created. And for some time it worked. And then one time it didn't work. I was up for a promotion, actually one of the top promotions. It was a senior management level role. And in my mind, I thought I had it in the bag, right? Because I was like, I know I worked my tail off. I know I kind of checked all the boxes. And to the shock of myself, and actually to even my colleagues, I actually did not get that promotion.
Wow.
And it was the first time in my life that I felt like, a formula I had created for success didn't work. And I felt like my world was going to come crashing down. Now, outside looking in, most people would say, Christie, it's not that serious. It's just a promotion. But I know how hard I worked. I know how prepared. I knew I did everything that I thought I was supposed to, but that was not good enough at that particular moment. So that night, I remember, I kind of had to go back to, what made me successful? And I thought about the fact that I had been using forgiveness casually throughout all of my career. And that's when I decided, I said, you know what, I need to formalize this technique. I need to soup up this forgiveness model I had been using. I need to soup it up to a whole other level, because what got me, what helped me become successful over the years, that helped me get into, going from a contributor role into management is not the same skills I'm going to need to become an executive or a senior executive. So that was the first realization that I got to change something up. And that's when I formalized my technique. So in doing so, something amazing happened. I actually became really intentional. There's kind of a systematic 3-step technique that I came up with. It's a reflect, reach out, release framework that I came up with. And I started using that. And the energy I had of the disappointment of that, of not getting that promotion, I fueled into putting my framework into work. And I mean, honestly, Brandon, I think in 15 months, literally my entire career changed. I went from not only getting that promotion, like 6-7 months later, but I also ended up writing my first book. I landed my first TED Talk. I really started to really become more of a thought leader, which was a little bigger than the role that I had. I was kind of going up for promotion in the first place. So I thought that I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. So I decided to share the technique with some friends and say, because they're like, Christie, what did you do? Something happened in your life and now you're like on fire. So what is it that you did? And I explained to them and I kind of gave them the technique and they applied it at work and they started to see changes. And then, in talking through them, it's like, I need to formalize this. And that actually was kind of the birth of this, this guided journal that I wrote.